You're listening to Where You Live with Gene Sullivan.
Welcome back to Where You Live. I'm Gene Sullivan, broadcasting from the True North Painting Studios. This show is brought to you by American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency, and Extreme Exteriors. Before we get into this is a great song you've picked, Chris, but Too Easy.
I could tell right away. He started smiling and laughing, so I knew you knew it.
Well, yes, that's probably because I've seen every single one, which I guess kind of shows you, my predilections when it comes to movies. But that was Austin Powers, right? The theme song to Austin Powers. I've got just one more to go here to see if I can bat 1,000. But I want to say to our listeners, we've got a free gift for you. We put together a bi-monthly newsletter. And a lot of the topics we cover on the show, we cover in further detail. People who are guests on our show are also writers for that newsletter as well. It's yours free for the asking. Give us a call during the week at New Concepts at 952-922-2500. Ask for Lori, and she'll make sure that you start receiving your copy either electronically or by mail. And I'd like to welcome back to our to this segment, Pamela Dittmer-McEwen, who's adjunct faculty member at Columbia College School of Journalism, who wrote a piece in the Chicago Tribune recently talking about creating sound policy for owners with disabilities, that if you're on an association board, you don't necessarily have to shy away from making some hard decisions sometimes, but you can deal in a consistent, fair, and understanding way. And right before we took the break, Pam, I said I wanted to ask you, what should go into good policy that a board should consider?
First of all, you should ask owners for their request in writing. Now, if someone stands up at a board meeting and says, I have a disability, I want such and such, that's verbal. Don't ignore them. Don't blow them off. Tell them to explain their request, what they're looking for in writing, because you want to start a paper trail.
And
you want to start a paper trail to go along with this request.
Yeah. Now, and that's not, some people will take the stance and say, boy, you're just being bureaucratic by asking me to put it in writing. They think of the homeowner association as being more informal, a closer, smaller knit sort of a quasi-government group. And so why can't I just come as a neighbor and just talk? But you say it's very important to put in writing.
Well, this is where it comes to you need to start a paper trail in case this blows up in some way, and also you can rely on your policy and say, well, this is the policy, everybody has to do it that way.
Okay. And again, like we said in the last segment, you start asking even one person to do something a little bit different than you asked someone else in the litigious society that we're in. It's easy for someone to say, hey, you're being inconsistent. That must mean that you are discriminating.
Yeah, you favor someone, then you really open yourself to a lawsuit. So make everybody make their request in writing.
Okay. So they make the request in writing. What is it that you ask them to show you other than the request?
You would want them to have a doctor or some other medical professional certify that the disability exists. Now, you can't ask questions or expect answers to what is your disability. That's considered too invasive. So all the doctor or medical professional has to do is certify that there is a disability. And then there's a second part to that. They also have to explain, the medical professional, how this accommodation will make life easier for the person with the disability.
Okay, that's very interesting, but it certainly makes sense because you say that there should be a relationship between the disability and the accommodation. What do you mean?
Well, for example, an extreme example would be if a person who is blind asks for a close parking space, a parking space close to the door. Well, it doesn't make sense that a blind person is going to drive. So they're probably asking for it for a family member or a caregiver. And the law, as I understand it, does not require associations to accommodate family members and caregivers. So that would be an example of an accommodation that has no relationship to the disability.
Now, you said you were a former president of the Homeowners Association where you live. Have you had to deal with some reasonable accommodations for a disabled person in your situation?
I did have one situation where an elderly woman who lived on the first floor of a 12-unit building asked if we would put in a sidewalk that from the main sidewalk, a small sidewalk from that to her back door, because there were no steps. And she said that someday down the road she would be in a wheelchair. Now, the law also requires the owners to pay for any costs associated with the accommodation, and she was willing to pay for this sidewalk. And owners also have to pay to restore the property to its natural original condition, after the accommodation is no longer needed. So she came to the board. She said a couple years down the road she would be in a wheelchair. She was willing to pay for this short sidewalk, maybe 20 feet long. She was willing to pay to have it ripped up when she no longer needed it. The way we handled it was we said we would take that into consideration, but we wanted to wait until it got closer to the time, because she was thinking 2 years down the road. As it turned out, she passed away before she ever needed the wheelchair.
That's too bad. But it sounds like you were able to deal with it in a very calm, reasonable fashion, and
we didn't say no automatically.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. It seems like some people almost feel in society today the need to ramp things up and begin with their first, volley with a threat of a lawsuit, instead of just asking and making a request. Do you see that happening?
Yes, I do. I don't know how many people actually go through with their lawsuits, but people do threaten lawsuits all the time for all kinds of reasons. So this is why you want your policy in place, and you want to establish a paper trail.
Yeah. Now, you said, of course, accommodation requests, they must be reasonable. And you also stated that just because an owner qualifies for an accommodation and is willing to pay for it doesn't mean the association must automatically grant it. What do you mean by that?
Well, in some cases, the association's hands are tied. In the case of someone who is having problems with walking, who wants a parking space closer to the door. But if all those parking spaces are deeded, other people own them. You can't take property away from another owner to give it to someone else. Now, if the association owns all the parking spaces and simply assigns them, yes, you can make a reassignment, but you can't take land away from another owner to give it to someone with a disability. So that would be an example.
You're right. That's a very good example. I had the same thing that happened in a condo association that we manage here in the Twin Cities, where that very thing happened. The individual was making a demand for a space, and we said, it's not that the association doesn't want to grant it, but we can't, because the association doesn't own that. That is deeded and is part of ownership with an individual in the association, and you can't just take away land or real property away from someone. You can't confiscate it like that. Mm-hmm. You also gave another example, and I thought this was really interesting with the whole idea of companion animals. That is something that I think is really just starting to go gangbusters with people who are living in an association where there's a prohibition against pets, and you're seeing more and more people who are saying, I need a companion animal for my emotional support. But you say that you feel that the association could even be talking to that individual about the type of animal that they have?
Sure. See, what's happening is part of this was the real estate bust and the Great Recession, that so many people's homes were foreclosed upon. So many homeowners lost their homes and are now renting or have moved to smaller quarters. So they get into a condo and they don't want to give up their family pets. They realize, oh my gosh, I'm in a unit in an association here. They don't allow dogs. And so I will say this is a support animal. It's a comfort animal. I need this for so that's one side of it. And then there are some people who truly do need their support animals. Of course, you would never tell someone who can't have a service dogs or something totally different from comfort animals. But suppose you're in a high-rise building and someone says, I need a comfort animal, and it has to be this 125-pound pit bull. That's, first of all, very, very large dogs should not be in high-rise living. It's too hard on them. They have to go out. They have to go through common areas. They have to go up and down elevators. Small dogs fare much better in apartments and confined places. So in that case, the person with a disability, you could say, all right, we've got your documentation, we've got the letter from the doctor, we've got we see how this animal will help you, but we don't feel this 125-pound pit bull belongs in a high-rise up on the 20th floor. So we would grant you, you can have a dog, but keep it under 20 pounds.
And you think that, do you know of any situation where someone pushed and said, no, it's got to be the 120-pound pit bull? And what I wonder if court has actually decided on something like that.
People who want to keep their animals, who want to keep their pets, will go to great lengths to keep them.
Yes, they will. I remember one person in one of our associations, the limit was 2 dogs, but there was a weight restriction. And they had a huge dog, and it was around that 150, 180-pound range, which was clearly overweight. And then the person came back and said, well, that second animal, that's my companion animal. And I guess the first one wasn't. The first one was just a utility dog, but the second one was the companion animal. So I guess people will try just about anything. But the bottom line here, you say that what's important is you need to document, right?
Document.
Yes.
And don't blow anyone off. You don't want them going into court and saying they ignored me. So you be reasonable and they be reasonable.
Okay. And lastly, if a person were to, if you're dealing with saying yes to an accommodation, you say most likely people can work that out themselves. If you have to say no, it's important to get the advice of an attorney, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you can handle the yeses yourself, but if you're going to say no, it's better to get the attorneys involved because they're the ones who know the ins and outs of fair housing laws and how to work with them.
Okay. Well, Pam, thanks so much for taking some time today to be on the show.
All right. Well, Gene, thank you for having me.
We appreciate that. Folks, that was Pamela Dittmer-McEwen, who is adjunct faculty member at Columbia College School of Journalism, freelance writer for the Chicago Tribune, and someone I appreciate, very thoughtful person with some good words to consider. Well, we've got one more segment. Don't go away. More of Where You Live on AM 1280 The Patriot after these messages.